Hey guys, I'm here and I'm presenting to you my webinar, Fitness for Resilience, How to Live Stronger Longer. Thank you so much for coming. I'm glad you can make it. If you're watching the recorded version, here you go. I actually did this webinar earlier and I forgot to press record, but I have a lot of people who wanted to watch it later, so I thought I would record it again. Luckily for you guys, I know all the stuff now. So yes, for this webinar, I struggled to find the title that I wanted to use. Fitness for Resilience, I think can also be used with longevity. We can also use it for functional aging. But I think that the title Fitness for Resilience does a good job of kind of explaining this idea of resilience to a whole population, regardless of what someone's age is. So pictured here is Peter Guest and his crew of teammates. I met Peter probably 2 to 3 years ago. He's an athlete at the Calgary Rowing Club who trains here in Calgary, and then he also lives part-time in Australia, so he returns back to Australia to row with his boys. So Peter gave me the opportunity to explain about him, his crew, their training. They had an interview with an article in Australia that kind of goes through all of their health history stuff and their dedication to the sport and how the sport has helped them. So I asked him if I could share it with you guys, and he agreed. So shout out to Peter. Thank you so much. Shout out to Peter's crew for letting me tell your story. It really was seeing your article, Peter, that made me want to do this webinar. So I believe you're currently sleeping while I record this, but you'll have this in your inbox soon enough. So a little bit about me. My name is Tessa, and what I do is I have a master's degree in exercise physiology, exercise science, and human performance from Ithaca College, that's in New York State. I have an undergraduate degree in clinical exercise physiology and cardiac rehab, so working with a diseased clinical population. Currently, I'm a student at the University of Calgary studying kinesiology. I'm completing my thesis, and I'm specializing in bone and exercise, specifically how muscle contractions can cause changes in bones, changing bone density and bone structure with and without the use of drug. I'll keep you guys posted on future developments for that. Currently, what I do is I operate as a strength and conditioning coach and personal trainer, working with a number of clubs, athletes, and clients. I recently got a specialist designation in functional aging. So that allows me to better understand exercise for an aging population, programming, considerations, accommodating groups of older clientele, and things that we should be aware of in working with that population. I'm also a certified strength and conditioning specialist, and I have been for a very long time. On the right, what you'll see is that's me. And then you'll also see my business partner, Doug Brown. We have actually come together to start a brand new company, Zeal Performance. So I believe we officially launched the company 2 days ago. We still do not have a location. We still do not have an opening date. We previously were only based in Calgary, only able to work with Calgarians, and we had zero online component. But now we are currently online. And so we're able to work with everyone across Canada if they're interested in training with us, offering remote coaching, phone calls, group training, classes, and things like that. Stay tuned for more information on that. We're hoping to be fully 100% online as of May 1st, 2020, but you guys will get a little bit more information about that as we go along. The purpose for our company is to focus on performance across the lifespan, is kind of how we've titled it. So what we're interested in doing is bringing high quality strength and conditioning to people, starting with Doug's specialty, which is sports performance and athletics, and bringing it all the way across the lifespan to our Faster Masters group, but also offering classes and group training sessions that will accommodate more dysfunctional people, so people who have joint replacements, people who might be on certain medications, people who've never trained before. So we're really trying to just target a whole realm of people. For myself, I was always a sports performance specialist, but I have a passion in working with regular people, which is what my undergraduate degree was, with disease populations. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm kind of trying to swing back into that realm of working with more of the general population. So, a couple disclaimers. I am not a doctor, okay? I have a master's degree in exercise physiology, so I will maybe call myself an exercise physiologist. I'd rather call myself a sports performance specialist who loves physiology, okay? So when it comes to information regarding your health, always refer to your physician for information specific to you, specific to your medications, previous injuries, and any current conditions or illnesses, okay? There's nothing here that I'm going to say that should or will substitute medical professional advice. Always go back to your doc. Whenever it comes to injuries, always go back to your physio or chiro, whoever, whatever sports professional you see for those injuries. The guidelines I'm going to explain to you guys later are Canadian guidelines, so if you're in Australia or the US, make sure you refer to your guidelines for those. And in terms of conflicts of interest, I am not sponsored by anyone. I guess I do own Zeal Performance, and I am totally biased because I'm a fitness advocate, and I think that we can be doing so much for our health regarding fitness that can help us in the long run, okay? So for today's webinar, what I want to go through is we're going to actually define resilience. We're going to talk about resilience in terms of times today. We'll talk about a couple things we cannot control, a couple aspects of fitness, small changes that we can make in our daily routines, and then we're going to finish up with a little quiz and a little quote from one of Peter's crewmates. So, start you guys off with a riddle. What is 304 years old and goes backward faster than it does forward? It's not the US economy during COVID-19, okay? I had someone guess the Canadian economy during COVID-19, and we're not that old, so it's not possible, okay? So the answer for this is Peter's crew. So Peter's crew is a cumulative 304 years old. If you math that, the average age of his crew is 76 years old, and because rowing is going backwards, technically they do go backwards faster than they do forward. The really cool part about this crew, which I'll explain more about after, is that regardless of what they've gone through in terms of their health and everything, they still meet together 3 days per week to train. And whether that's motivated by coffee or beer, or their love for the sport, or a combination of both, I think it's awesome. So this group is definitely my inspiration for doing this webinar. Understand that these guys are an elite group of athletes. They have represented Australia, Olympic Games, international competitions, and everything. So they are very elite, very trained, very skilled, but I think that there are things that in their approach to exercise and training that we can take back and look at and learn a little bit from. So this crew, average age 76. So during their interview with this paper in Australia, they mentioned a couple, what's the word I should say, maybe points for potential adversity that they've experienced during sport. So cancer, couple bouts of cancer. I believe a total of 5 within the crew. I'm sure Peter could tell me specifically. These arrows are not specific to the crew member. It's just in general to give you guys an idea. So 5 diagnoses of cancer, plus some chemo-induced nerve damage, a few heart attacks and bypasses, 5 fake joints. I'm guessing 5. I know one of the guys said that he was expecting to go in for a joint replacement sometime at the end of March, but maybe he didn't get a chance to with this COVID-19 thing. And then just a bout of sepsis and some asthma, as well as some ectomies, okay? So I think what's really cool about this is you see how there's so many different things health-wise and injury-wise, surgery-wise going on within the crew. but they still, as soon as they're back cleared by their doc, they are back out in training, which I think is incredible. So that brings us to our term resilience. How does someone define resilience? So I say resilience, and essentially by definition, it is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. It is your ability to bounce back. Okay, so after an injury, after an illness, or a surgery, how quickly do you get back into your daily routines? And are you able to do those daily routines the way that you used to do them? So let's think about some physical traits or attributes that might make someone more resilient to injury or illness. So I want you to think about someone who you know who may have had a heart attack or cancer, broken bone, they had a fall, and they bounce back. They're back at it, back on their bike, they're walking, they're doing everything that they were doing before. So with this crew, one thing we do know is a good physical trait to have is that you're Australian. Australians, turns out, they're harder to kill than everyone else in the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe I'm not. But not all of us are Australian, okay? So we can't always rely on being from down under. So some physical traits and attributes that help with resilience. Two things I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about musculoskeletal fitness to start. When people talk about musculoskeletal fitness, they sometimes will talk about the idea of frailty, okay? When we think of people who are frail, usually people think of like someone who's rounded forward in a wheelchair and just very thin and with no muscle mass, who doesn't really move very well and has a high dependence on people. In reality, frailty is actually a clinical term that's used, and what it describes is vulnerability after a stressful event, okay? In my opinion, it is a product of poor resilience, okay? So specific to musculoskeletal fitness, first thing we need is strong muscles, okay? Strong muscles are going to help with activities of daily living, so that we can go through and continue to do everything exactly the way that we did, and we're not afraid of injury while we do those. So strong muscles will help you carry your groceries. They're going to help you reach up overhead, get dishes out of the cupboard. If you're flying, it's the ability to take your luggage and put it up overhead and not worry about knocking out the person sitting underneath the cabinet. It is also something as simple as hanging Christmas lights, okay? Mobility in movement specifically. So this isn't necessarily yoga, okay? A lot of times when I say mobility, people say, oh, I need to stretch. It's not necessarily that. Yes, it is a component of that, but with mobility, it's your ability to stand up, your ability to sit down, your ability to go down from the ground and stand back up again, okay? And how difficult it is for you to go through those different kind of movements and potential limitations you might have in doing those. Another consideration for this one is the ability to go up and down stairs, okay? So when I say mobility and movement, I know a lot of people who have the ability to go up and down stairs, but do they go up and down stairs well? Are they afraid because the stairwell's too narrow or because there's no hand railing to help support them? That I also consider mobility and movement. The last component of musculoskeletal fitness is stability and balance, okay? Especially in Canada. Just became summer yesterday. It's been snowing every single day since November, pretty much. But now it's summertime, it turns out. So when it comes to stability and balance, for us, this winter was perfect in that we had ice all the time. There was always ice or there was fresh snow. Walking on snow, whenever it's like not quite packed or it's slushy, walking on ice, the ability to correct our bodies if we do have a slip up is stability and balance, okay? Getting in and out of your car and being able to either, if your car is very low down, sitting down into the vehicle and not just plopping right down into the seat. I also consider that to be stability and balance, okay? Can you carry things while you're going up and down the stairs? All of these three components help you to continue to live your life independently. They keep you moving throughout the day, uninterrupted from your regular routine. Okay, ideally you're doing all of these so you're strong enough to do all of your activities of daily living without having fear of falling or getting injured and things like that. The second component of being resilient is going to be everything that is cardiovascular. Okay, so cardio meaning heart, vascular meaning the spread of blood throughout the body, the flow of oxygen throughout the body. So circulation is very important. We're not going to cover that specifically here. What we are going to talk about more specifically is the heart, and we're also going to talk about the lungs, especially with the recent development of COVID-19. The lungs are super important just because of how the virus likes to attack the system, okay? So factors that are impacting resilience to illness that we see now, okay? I pulled all this data off of research that was based on COVID-19, SARS, H1N1, and MERS data analyses that I found, okay? So aside from age, being over the age of 60, the strongest risk factor for developing complications from influenza-like diseases is actually obesity, number one, okay? The other ones kind of fall underneath it, but the biggest indicator for complications is obesity and overweight, more so obesity. So having that BMI over 35 is a higher indicator for risks associated. The other aspects of this come with chronic lung disease, asthma, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and diabetes. Tricky part with this one is that frequently people who have these conditions, if it's not a predisposed condition, usually those people are also obese. So what do we take from this? Docs research, they are proposing that this increased risk factor is likely due to a decrease in lung function and capacity, as well as more systemic inflammation. For the purpose of this presentation, I want to talk more so about the decreased lung function and capacity. So with this, what comes first? Is it the chicken or the egg? Specifically when it comes to cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, we will usually see those in our obese population more so than we'll see them in our normal weight populations. So first, let's talk about what we can control in these situations. It might be easier to list what we cannot control, just for peace of mind, okay? Things we can't control: government shutdowns, forced distancing and isolation, can't control either of those. Any pre-existing conditions or medical history, have no control over those. Our biological age, we're all getting older while we're sitting here, we have no control. The last thing we can't control is our genetics. Dr. Russell, he's a philosopher from Great Britain in the mid-1900s, he said, choose your parents wisely. A lot of people ran with this for a long time, and it is true. You have to choose your parents wisely, but there's been a lot of research on epigenetics. So it's the ability for certain factors to kind of change the way our genes are expressed. So we receive our genetics from our parents and the lineage that we come from, but how we live life has the ability to affect how those genes are expressed, okay? So a definition of this, or a good explanation of this, is modifiable lifestyle and environmental factors like diet and exercise significantly influence gene expression, okay? And this is in part orchestrated by epigenetic modifications. I'm gonna have these resources. I'm gonna send out the PowerPoint as well as this recording for you guys so you can see the resources that I've used. So this is something that we can control in a situation like today. We have the ability to change our lifestyle, our environmental factors, so that maybe we have less likely for development of certain diseases, okay, in the long run. So aspects of health and well-being that we do have control of. The idea of premium versus unleaded fuel. So what are you putting into your system to fuel your daily activities? What is your diet? Are you taking your necessary supplements? Fun fact, if we live in Canada, which most of us do, it's actually recommended that we supplement with vitamin D all year round. Okay, we're actually the only country in the world who has that requirement listed whenever it comes to bone health. Fun fact. The other things you put into your body, your meds that you're supposed to be taking that have been prescribed to you. Alcohol consumption and tobacco use, those have been shown to affect epigenetics as well. I'm not saying to stop drinking, it's tough times, but moderation's great. Tobacco use, I have no opinion because I don't know the research on it except for it's bad. The other thing to pay attention to is your sleep hygiene. This is something we can control. There's an association between sleep and our immune systems. Okay, so we can work to really fine tune our sleeping patterns, our sleeping habits. That's just going to make daily life and establishing a routine that much easier. Spinal hygiene is another thing that we can control in these situations. So it's an odd one. It's one that I will use when I'm dealing with people who have chronic low back pain. Especially with chronic back pain, you have to be paying attention to how you're positioning yourself throughout the spine in every single task you're doing in daily life, even while we're sitting here, okay? When it comes to this situation, our social isolation, we're so technology heavy. We're always on our computers, our tablets, or our phones, or watching TV. So making sure with that we're not developing this forward head and rounded forward posture so that we can stay upright. This is really important for, in the future, preventing falls. People who have a forward head posture have decreased mobility and decreased balance, okay? The last aspect that we can control is our daily activity. I don't want to categorize this just as exercise. I want to say daily activity. So if it's something where you wake up in the morning, have your coffee, go out for a walk to hear the birds chirp, awesome. If you go to the mailbox to go get the mail, grocery store, whatever, it's considering being active throughout the day as a whole versus obsessing about the exercise that we do. Exercise is important and it does play a role in our overall health, but being sedentary all day long and working out for an hour, it's good, but if we can get up, move around a little bit throughout the day and do our workout, that's awesome. Biggest issue with this one right now is watching that screen time, okay? So now we're going to talk about the heart and we're going to talk about the lungs specifically, okay? So hearts are muscles too. People think that hearts are just organs. Hearts are muscles, okay? Hearts are really cool in how they respond to exercise, how they respond to activity. But just like biceps, hearts like to be flexed, okay? Hearts can get bigger. It's called hypertrophy. And hearts can actually produce a more powerful repetition with training, okay? So an example of this is if my heart is beating, this is me living my regular life, my heart's beating just like this, open, close, open, close. As I exercise, my heart starts to beat faster and it starts to beat faster, okay? Eventually my heart's gonna be like, oh, I just wanna get better at this so I don't have to beat as many times. So what it does is it gets better at pushing the blood out, relaxing to expand so it can actually get bigger, and then pushing more blood out in response to that. So it gets better at being relaxed in order to take in more blood and expel more blood. So your efficiency per beat increases with training. But just like doing bicep curls, we need two things. We need time, which is repetition, okay? And we need load, which is intensity. Think about this. If I'm going to be in the gym and I want to get my bicep bigger, if I do one set of 3, my arm is not going to see any changes versus if I do 3 sets of 12. Exact same thing with my heart. If I'm only exercising for 1 minute at a time at a super light intensity, my heart's not going to see those changes that it needs to start making until I increase that time to 10 minutes, say, and I'm going at a moderate intensity. then my heart is going to figure out how to be stronger. It has to do that because I have to be able to deal with the extra load that's coming through the blood volume that's filling up the heart so that the muscle tissue can get stronger. And just like I mentioned, load is intensity. So when we want our biceps to get bigger, we lift more muscle, we lift more weight, and that's going to strain the muscle tissue, and the muscle tissue is going to figure out how to get bigger. Whenever it comes to exercise, if I'm only exercising at a light load, a light workload and effort, super easy, I'm not breaking a sweat, it's not enough to challenge the heart tissue. I have to be exercising between that moderate to vigorous range, according to Canadian standards, for a certain amount of time for the heart to start seeing changes. We want to make sure, especially as we age, that we keep that intensity high enough for long enough days of the week in order to get those changes that our body needs. The lungs. Okay, I labeled this slide the forgotten organ. I think there's a lot of other organs that we kind of forget about in the body, but for today, it's the lungs, okay? So while we're sitting here, our lungs are we're only actually using 20 to 30% of our lungs. Lungs only like to be used, like maybe 95% of the space in my lung is actually used. So even when Michael Phelps is racing and setting world records, he's still only using 95% of his lungs. That's because we need a little bit of space, a little bit of dead space, dead air in the very bottom in order to keep my lung inflated. Otherwise, I just get a collapsed lung, and that's no good, okay? So lungs are lazy. If you know anybody who's gone through cardiac rehabilitation, they take a long time, pulmonary rehabilitation, not cardiac, pulmonary. Lungs take a long time to get better. They are less resilient than the heart is at bouncing back when they've been damaged, especially if you know someone with emphysema or COPD. It's much more challenging process. So we can think of our lungs as two balloons. This is a healthy lung, okay? This is the lung of someone who's been exercising regularly, we'll say for about 2 to 3 years, 5 days a week. This is a lung of somebody who does not exercise ever, okay? You'll notice how this lung is smaller than this lung. So whenever something like COVID-19 happens, or general influenza or pneumonia happens, what happens is I have my lung here, and say I lose 30% function, okay, of my lungs because of my illness. So I lose 30% of my function in my big lung. So now I only have this much space in my good lung. But I lose 30% in my less fit population. This individual only has this much space in their lungs to work with now. And that's the tricky part when it comes to COVID-19. The way that the virus attacks the lungs is it starts to decrease the functional capacity of that lung. So if I'm this person over here and I just have less capacity, then whenever I'm compromised, there's way less wiggle room for me to still be able to be functional while I'm sick, okay? I think that that's a really good visualization to think about influenza-like illnesses and how they affect the body. So the key whenever we're working with our lungs, whenever we're trying to improve and be proactive in our lung health, regular exercise is going to improve efficiency. So what it does is it makes more of the lung active sooner, okay? So we can think about that balloon getting a little bit bigger. What it also does is it improves the body's ability to get oxygen away from the lung. So what happens in your lung tissue is it's surrounded by tissue and there's little alveoli in there. We have 450 million alveoli in our lungs, okay? Think of these as workers who are loading up trains on a loading dock, okay? We have 450 million little people, okay, who are helping us load an infinite number of trains that just keep coming in. Throwing things on, trains are going, throwing things on, trains are going. As soon as we're compromised, whether it's because of illness or because of lack of fitness, We decreased that number by half, so now we only have 225 million people who are loading those trains for us, and now the trains are coming in a little bit slower, okay? Our ability to ship off our product is going to be so much lower if our lungs aren't functioning at optimal capacity. So by doing regular exercise, we're increasing our lungs' ability to expand, and we're increasing the ability to get those trains off the dock, getting all of our alveoli working. For people who have COPD or emphysema, what happens is the alveoli are damaged because of environmental exposure. So that's why it's a lot trickier for them. You can say the same with asthma, but it's a little bit different. So first things first, we have to exercise. Exercise is good for lung tissue, okay? The second thing is we have to learn how to breathe, okay? Your lung support team is your diaphragm and the muscles around your rib cage, okay? So especially if you've had pneumonia, if you had that weird flu that everybody had earlier this year that they were hacking out their lungs for like 3 months afterwards, okay? Make sure that you're breathing properly. So when I'm breathing, I want to make sure I'm not breathing through my shoulders like this. I want to make sure I'm breathing through my belly, okay? So practicing breathing in and expanding through my rib cage, expanding into the side of my rib cage, and expanding into my back. Guys, this is something you can practice twice a day, in the morning when you wake up and at night whenever you go to bed, okay? So some changes that we can make now. 2 little things. Move more throughout the day, okay? How can you make your day harder? Little things to challenge yourself a little bit more. If you live in a 4th floor apartment condo, start by walking down the stairs. Don't worry about walking up the stairs. Walk down the stairs. You can park your car farther away. Take an episode of How I Met Your Mother, because I'm currently obsessed with the show, and just stretch. It's about 21 to 22 minutes long, okay? The other thing I've been doing for myself is I have a quarantine walking. I do it once a week. I'll phone a friend. Last weekend, I called my friend who lives in DC, and we talked on the phone for about 45 minutes or so while we both walked. So she was walking in DC and I was walking in Calgary. Or go for a walk with whoever you're living with, whoever you're isolating with. If you're stuck at home, walk in place, okay? Just simply marching in place and swinging your arms. Going up and down the stairs twice every hour is super beneficial. It's all of these little things that will add up throughout your day. And over the course, finally when we're done isolating, then you can go back into your regular routine and you have the potential to be even stronger and fitter whenever we're done with our isolation. How hard and how often do I exercise is a question that I get frequently. So I have an example video for you. Shout out to my mom for being my dummy here. Let's see if this plays. Is it gonna work? I'm not sure. Okay, so this is a video of my mother on the treadmill. She loves singing Rihanna while she walks. So this is a really good example of using what I call the talk test. So we listen to my mother on the treadmill, which you can hardly hear over the actual treadmill because it's really old. You can hear that she's singing. So she's singing while she's walking on the treadmill. She has a little bit of an incline there, and she's going a decent pace. So if I were to look at the talk test in relation to her exercise session, what I would say is if full singing and conversation with 0 issues, not gasping for breath, is a light intensity. Moderate intensity is the ability to speak 2 to 3 sentences at a time with some difficulty and you can't sing. I would say that my mom is at a moderate intensity there. Okay, so if she was only speaking 1 sentence at a time and she was having a little bit of difficulty, I'd say it's moderate to vigorous. And then vigorous intensity is when you cannot carry on a conversation. You can only say a few words at a time. So the requirements in Canada, or the guidelines, I should say, in Canada for aerobic exercise for people 18 years and older is 150 minutes per week of at least 10 minutes per bout, okay? So if you don't have 30 minutes to go exercise and you only have 10, go outside, crush a quick walk around the block, 10 minutes, done, awesome, okay? So this time, the 150 minutes should be somewhere between moderate to vigorous, okay? The biggest issue with the aging population is that a lot of people aren't exercising as intensely as they should be, okay? I know Peter's watching this. Peter, I'm pretty sure you're exercising as intensely as you should be. Don't go harder, because I know you would. Rowers are definitely they're a difficult crew. But in general, try to sing or try to speak while you're exercising. And if you can speak 2 to 3 sentences at a time and you have difficulty doing it, awesome, okay? Speaking 1 sentence at a time, cool. If you haven't been exercising, definitely talk to a doctor before you start an exercise program, okay? So that is how intensely and how long you should be exercising per week for cardio training. We have to remember in this that fit isn't always functional. I think we all know people who can run, bike, swim forever and ever and ever, and they just don't stop ever, okay? We can think about the heart and the lungs like an engine, okay? We start training and our engine is the same as a 2003 Toyota Echo. We have a nice little V4 engine. It's just enough. It's enough for the little car. It can get you up enough hills. As we become fitter, it's just like putting a Chevy block engine into a Toyota Echo. So we have to remember that our frame, the structure of the car, has to be strong enough to match the engine of the vehicle. So if we take that Chevy block engine, we put it into our 2003 Toyota Echo, what happens with more mileage that we're putting on the vehicle? What happens with the speed that that engine can produce, the deceleration that's needed for this, the forces going through the body of the vehicle? Guys, it's the exact same thing. When I start an exercise program, if I'm not strong enough to go downhill, it's a lot of force going through my knees, right? If I'm taking the stairs more frequently, I have to be stronger in order to do the stairs. If I'm getting a lot of repetitions and covering a ton of mileage, I have to make sure that the muscle mass is there, that the tendons and ligaments can also handle all of that extra volume that I'm doing. Or I'm moving faster, there's more forces going through the body. So, quiz time. Which type of exercise is best for resilience, or I'm going to call it functional longevity, okay? So there's a difference between longevity, which is just living, having a heartbeat, okay? And what I call functional longevity, which I'm going to say is the ability to live independently, okay? So exercise 1, which is walking. Exercise 2, which is strength training. So the hint for this one is, what will help you stay independent for longer and continue doing your daily routines, your regular routines? The answer for this one is strength training, okay? So although walking, your cardiovascular, keeping your ticker ticking is so important for so many things, having your lung function be big enough so in case you do get sick, get pneumonia, whatever, you can bounce back because you have that lung capacity to help support you. Obviously, we have to keep the engine going because having a really nice frame of a car is nice, but if the engine doesn't run, it's totally useless. So when it comes to functional aging, functional longevity, the biggest thing to pay attention to is strength training, okay? It's a little tricky because I'm telling you, do more cardio. These are things you can do. These are things you can change right now. And it's true. Be more active throughout the day. Make sure when you do go for walks or runs or bike rides or rows that you're rowing enough and that you're rowing at a good intensity for that so you can get those adaptations. We need that. But I also don't want you to start only thinking about your cardiovascular health and forget about basic things, working on mobility, working on your stability, and your general total body strength training. okay? I want to end this, this presentation with a quote, and that is one from one of Peter's crewmates. He says, "I think as people get older, they lose their confidence, but they should put aside the negatives and get out there and have a go. A healthy body is a healthy mind." And I think that right now, with the current situation that we're in, a healthy body is a healthy mind. So make sure you're taking care of yourself, that you're putting good fuel into the tank, practicing good sleep hygiene, trying to get better at something because we have the time right now, even if we don't have access to facilities that we usually do. There's a lot of things you guys can do at home with your support team that will really help in the long run. All right? Guys, that's all I have for you. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Feel free to reach out to me with questions that you might have. You can email me hello@zealperformance.ca. Again, thank you to Peter and his crew for being the face of my presentation. I really appreciate, and I think you guys are going to love this webinar. Okay? See you later. Until next time.